I'm Hugh Hewitt, back in after being in Connecticut yesterday. Thanks to Alex Marlowe for sitting in for me yesterday. Alex had been to Charlie Kirk's memorial service on Monday, but he had made a commitment weeks ago to be there, as I had weeks ago to be in Connecticut. And we both kept our commitments, and I'm deeply appreciative of Alex for coming and talking to you first person from having been in the State Farm Stadium for Charlie's memorial service, which I think one of the more remarkable events of my lifetime. I do want to begin by thanking John Fuller, who is the guy who runs Talk of Connecticut, WDRC, and 94.9 News Now, WJJF. John and George Agnelli and Gary and Bobby and everybody else who took care of me. We had a wonderful time with the state GOP. I really want to say a shout out to Sophia. Not going to use her last name. Sophia is the brilliant, smart, extremely charismatic leader of Turning Point USA at UConn, whose membership has doubled in the almost 2 weeks since Charlie's assassination. And they're not slowing down, they're not stopping. But I wrote a column for Fox News this morning on how will the news media cover Charlie's service, because it's really unique. I have in front of me the New York Post story that says Charlie Kirk Memorial drew at least 20 million cable TV and online viewers. I think that's low. I think that's the U.S. audience. Doesn't account for the worldwide audience. Doesn't account for replays, clips, snippets, that sort of thing. But it's enormous. Now, it's true that Bishop Fulton Sheen used to draw an audience of 30 million in the 50 when he did the Champaign Bishop did his hour. But he was never as explicitly evangelical as the event was. And by evangelical, I do not mean Christian nationalist. I do not mean Roman Catholic. I just mean a basic mere Christian witness. Best summarized by, I think, a minute and a half or 2 minutes of Secretary of State Marco Rubio, cut number one.
One of the things he wants us to take away from this, from all of this, is the following. His deep belief that we were all created, every single one of us, before the beginning of time, by the hands of the God of the universe, an all-powerful God, who loved us and created us for the purpose of living with him in eternity. But then sin entered the world and separated us from our Creator. And so God took on the form of a man and came down and lived among us. And he suffered like men. And he died like a man. But on the third day, he rose unlike any mortal man. And to prove any doubters wrong, he ate with his disciples so they could see, and they touched his wounds. He didn't rise as a ghost or as a spirit, but as flesh. And then he rose to the heaven, but he promised he would return. And he will. And when he returns, because he took on that death, because he carried that cross, we were freed from the sin that separated us from him. And when he returns, there will be a new heaven and a new earth, and we will all be together, and we are going to have a great reunion there again with Charlie and all the people we love. Thank you, and God bless you.
That is one of the most concise presentations of the gospel I've ever heard. Now, I happen to believe that's true. 60% of America is Christian, and 2.5 billion people around the world are Christian. But more importantly, how many people were intrigued and touched by that message? Here's my key point. Pastors, priests, religious of all sorts, and all sorts of congregations. I think this coming Sunday or Saturday, depending on when you worship, for example, Seventh-day Adventists and Jews are a Saturday Sabbath keeper. Most Christians are Sunday, and Catholics get to choose and go to Saturday afternoon, evening Mass. The number of new believers or people newly curious about the faith will be significant, especially if people who already believe invite people who might have seen that to come with them to church. And so I'm hoping that pastors, priests, ministers of all sorts, rabbis, and anyone in the business of ministering is prepared to present basic Christology and a little bit of apologetics. Nothing too fancy, just that the history of the Jewish people is the history of the salvation people. They are God's chosen people. They are set apart. Jesus is a Jew. All of his apostles were Jewish, and they went into the world after Jesus' crucifixion. And there's no doubt that it's objectively true that he lived. And I believe the evidence is overwhelming that it's objectively true that he was crucified, buried, 3 days later rose again from the dead and ascended into heaven. I believe in the Apostles' Creed. And I think the essence of that service was in Isaiah chapter 55, verse 11. That is part of the original Jewish scriptures, referred to by Christians as the Old Testament, but it's the Testament Jewish scriptures. So shall my word be that goes forth from my mouth. It shall not return to me void, but it shall accomplish what I please, and it shall prosper in the thing for which I sent it. Now, I have no idea who heard what, when. Did they feel Erica Kirk's amazing act of forgiveness towards her husband's killer? Did they hear President Trump say Charlie was principally an evangelist and that there's no underestimating what a person with a good heart? Did they hear J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, say he'd spoken more about Jesus Christ in the last 2 weeks than he had in his entire life? Because like most Christians in the public square, including me, we don't talk much about our faith. I'm very openly Christian, and I'm a funny kind of Christian. I'm an evangelical Roman Catholic Presbyterian, one river, two banks. I'm comfortable. I'm bilingual. I speak Catholic. I'm a member in good standing. I can receive, and I do receive communion every week. I go to confession when I miss Mass so that I can receive communion again. And I'm a ordained elder in the Presbyterian Church, so I'm bilingual. But there aren't a lot of people in America who actually, in the news business, who understand what that was. My friends at the Wall Street Journal, great newspaper, their headline today is Marco Rubio's Charlie Kirk message. The Secretary of State hits political notes the young need to hear. No. The Secretary of State, the Vice President, Erica Kirk, all hit messages of salvation history, of the objective truth of the gospel. And come Sunday, this Sunday and the next Sunday and Saturday, if you're Saturday Sabbath keepers, be prepared for people who saw that, because it began about 2 o'clock East Coast time, 11 o'clock in the West. And a lot of people didn't go to church or caught up with it in the afternoon or watched between NFL games or whatever. They got some of it, and a whole bunch of people were mightily impressed. Just as a matter of production, TPUSA knows how to do that, and they did it extremely well. Every Christian band in America volunteered. The praise was wonderful. Almost all of the messaging was Christology and basic salvation history and Charlie's main message of being a Christian. And it cannot help but have exposed tens or even hundreds of millions of people to a glimpse of the gospel that they haven't seen in decades, because the public square has been naked of religious belief, especially Erica Kirk, especially that young man, I forgive him, which is the essence of the Christian gospel, love your enemies. And I think it will have a massive impact, but it's hard to tell. The Christian worldview is a long one. Right? We don't work in news cycles. I was pleased to worship this past year at a Baptist church in Maine that sent a missionary, George Boardman, an American Baptist church, to Burma in 1825, to the Karen people, and that's what their name is, K-A-R-E-N, the Karen people. Some people spell it K-A-R-A-N, and there are thousands of Karen congregations around the world now. They're Christian congregations, hundreds in the United States, more than 1,000 in what used to be called Burma, many in Thailand, throughout Southeast Asia. One guy with his wife taking ship from Maine in 1825 had this 200-year far-reaching effect that goes on and on and on and on and on. So we really don't know in eternal time what that means. But I'm begging the ministers of word and sacrament, whatever your denomination, to preach openly and welcomingly and not politically to the people who come, and to the members of the news media to not be afraid about a story of religious belief. because you have been afraid. You haven't known what to do with it, and you haven't known how to put it into a box. It's easier to run on to the president, and I will get to the president of the General Assembly, but that was probably the biggest Christian witness service of memorial and grieving and mourning and celebration ever in the history of the world. That will not be without effect. John Ashbrook is one of the fellows of the Ruthless podcast, the most influential podcast among young people, now that Charlie is gone. And I say that sincerely. I think a lot of the Turning Point USA folks are going to take a lot of cues from Ruthless John Ashbrook. What did you make of Sunday's service?
I thought it was incredible, Hugh. And Charlie was just a real leader in our country. I mean, whether you were conservative or you're not conservative, you cannot look at the life that that guy led and conclude anything other than he was a special guy. And I really think, Hugh, that he ignited something in our country that we just haven't seen before, particularly with younger men, younger women. You know, I remember talking to a buddy of mine whose son was in high school and was just getting run over, roughshod by his teachers. And he was like, Dad, I don't even know how I should handle myself in class. They're telling me I'm doing everything wrong just because of the way I look, because of who I am. And then he started watching Charlie Kirk, and this kid completely turned around, you know? And I just think that's just one story about one kid, and you know it applies to hundreds of thousands all across the country. So he will be missed. He will be missed, but I don't think that his legacy will ever go away.
I agree with that. Now, I was in Connecticut last night doing an event for the Connecticut GOP, and Sophia runs the TPUSA at UConn, big campus. They have doubled in size since Charlie's murder. Now, some of that may dissipate, others may join. I think, though, it's a sort of cementing into place. But I was also kind of astonished. I've never seen anything like that, John. I've been doing this for 35 years. The Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, the Vice President, the President, all proclaiming Christian faith, Erica forgiving her husband's murder. Do you think there's a spiritual aspect to this? I don't know what you guys' religious views are at Ruthless. I've never asked you, but I thought it was kind of an overwhelming service.
Yeah, no question. There was a spiritual aspect to it. I mean, it was like a revival like event, and what Erica Kirk said was so powerful. And I think one of the most powerful things I saw, another sort of small aspect to how Charlie lived his life. A buddy of mine who works with him posted a picture of a Bible verse that Charlie had right next to his desk. It was from Micah 6:8. And I could quote it right now.
What
but
does the Lord God require of you but to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God?
Exactly, exactly. And that's what he looked at next to his computer every single day. And that, you know, that was what inspired him. That's how he lived his life. And it was such a great example to everybody else.
Well, I hope he has a very positive impact on the media, but the media doesn't want to cover it, John. They really are trying to put this into a political box of Christian nationalism, which is a bogeyman that doesn't really exist. I've argued about this with Tim Alberta and other people John Ward and other people who've written books about the danger. It's all kind of silly, but they don't know what to do with this. And they don't know what to do with the fact that a lefty killed him. Do you think they will get off of this and move on to simply saluting a young man who was shot down in his prime?
Well, you'd like to hope so. I mean, I understand that those guys have a point of view, but in this case, you cannot look at Charlie and the reaction that everybody has had to his life, his example, and now after his murder. You can't look at that and conclude anything other than God is moving in this country in a way that maybe we haven't seen before. And I really don't think it's the time to start criticizing him or because you didn't like the way he did something. I mean, there's so much of that in the church. There's too much of that. And, you know, I feel like I really hope that those guys, and I know those guys you're talking about, I really hope they don't pursue that.
Before I went off to Connecticut, I was on Fox very early, 5:05, 5:10, something like that on Monday morning. I was asked about AOC and Jasmine Crockett, and I said they diminished themselves by attempting to diminish Charlie, especially given the size of that event and the people that turned out. I think it crushed AOC's appeal because basic decency is still an American. I don't know. We're from Ohio. Basic
Right.
decency is something that goes around in Ohio, and you don't dance on the graves of the dead, do we?
Not, I mean, I couldn't believe what they were saying, honestly. As bad as they are on a routine basis, I really couldn't believe that they were doubling down on that day. It just was despicable. And, it sort of reveals who they are, because normal people wouldn't act like that. It's the opposite of what Charlie was saying. This is a guy who had debates with people who had the opposite point of view of his, and everything was civil. Everything was just an effort to get to the bottom of a conversation and have a relationship, and you could see that. And I don't understand for the life of me Ilhan Omar and AOC, but I don't think I ever will.
I think they're going over the left cliff. I do think they're in danger of becoming the DSA instead of the Democratic Party. Do you see that, John?
Without a doubt. I mean, without a doubt, you don't need to look any further than Mamdani and all of the establishment Democrats who are falling all over themselves to get up there and try to endorse him or to be a part of it. I mean, on what planet does a normal political party pursue socialism? Their party is in a bad, bad spot. And until they come to grips with that, I just don't see their path back.
So one of the guys who was driving me around Connecticut, Bobby, wonderful guy, retired policeman, talked to me about Trump. Why did I like him? I said, well, he used to beat me up and slap me around on the debate stage, but he's an A to B kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I've learned to like the A to B kind of thing. And he
Hmm.
did that at the General Assembly today. He said, you're screwing around with migration, climate change is nuts, and you got to leave us alone. America belongs to Americans. What'd you think of that message? It's an A to B
I
message.
It is A to B, and I love it. And Trump reserves his best stuff for the biggest stages, and he didn't disappoint this morning. I mean, that whole speech, start to finish, was powerful, and everything was very clear. Everything from like the climate crazies to a call to release the hostages to a call for peace around the world. And you look at the contrast between the strength of his message and then Kamala Harris, who is out there on her book tour reminding everybody why she wasn't qualified to be president of the United States. And it is a perfect reminder of why we picked the right guy in that election last year. And
Excellent.
nobody in that audience at the UN could have mistaken anything he was saying. It was so clear, and
No,
A to B is a good way to say it.
and then he finished up with, oh, by the way, we're going to shoot Russian planes down if they come into NATO. John Ashbrook
Right.
of Ruthless Podcast. Thank you, friend. Follow him at John Ashbrook on X, Ruthless Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. I want to tell you about the American Exploration and Production Council. That's axpc.org. It's our new sponsor. They also sponsor the Ruthless Podcast, by the way. They're smart people. American Exploration and Production Council wants to fix our broken permitting system. Now, I was a land use lawyer for 30 years. I'm retired. I teach now. I don't do it anymore. But making the bureaucracy work is so important. And the American Exploration and Production Council, axpc.org, is going to work across agencies and industries to cut bureaucracies, not environmental safeguards. We need American made oil and natural gas. It's essential to growing our energy demand and meeting it. If we lead, we lower costs for families, we secure high paying jobs, we Americans save money. The stakes couldn't be higher. Our economy and energy dominance depend on it. So see the plan for yourself at axpc.org. That's axpc.org. Lawrence Stewart is Federal Liaison Officer with Americans for Prosperity, a sponsor of my program. Lauren, welcome. I want to know, I've got Majority Leader Thune coming on tomorrow. He wants to talk about the Schumer shutdown. What are Democrats asking for, and why is it so absurd?
Thanks for having me, Hugh. So, number one, the reason that they're asking for anything is that Republicans in both chambers put forth a clean CR simply to keep the government open. This is the same exact bill that Democrats voted for just 4 months ago. But in terms of their demands around this very short-term CR. We're talking about a 7-week CR, include things like making the Biden COVID credits permanent. So this is being sold as regular Obamacare, that Obamacare is expiring. That's absolutely not the case. These are boosted Obamacare subsidies that Democrats put in place during the subsidies. These subsidies removed any income verification and fraud checks on people getting free health insurance on the dime of the United States taxpayer. So those were put in place through the American Rescue Plan. Not a single Republican voted in favor of it. And then they were extended through the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022 because the Democrats said, the pandemic is not indeed over. So, but that's twice that they voted for these to expire. So when Democrats are saying this is Republicans' healthcare crisis, this is actually something they fully created, completely absent any Republican support, vote, or input on the process. So they're asking not only to have those Biden COVID credits extended, but for them to be made permanent. Now, when they asked the Congressional Budget Office what would happen, what would be the impact if they were made permanent, the Congressional Budget Office came back and said that middle-class families would see $19,000 in out-of-pocket costs, and about a third of their medical claims would be denied. So that's a huge aspect of what they're asking for and what they're willing to shut down the government for. In the end, they're really fighting for insurers' profits with these things because insurers have banked $40 billion per year ever since these subsidies have been in play. And they want to make sure that they continue to lock that in, but it is not helping American families. It is not helping American patients. And this is the exact thing voters in the 2024 election voted against, the status quo of bad politics and bad policy from the Biden administration and Democrats.
Now, the way I've been reading this, Lauren, if they went through regular order and they got into some reforms about Obamacare and they wanted to trade tax credits for able-bodied checks to make sure that we're not funding people who aren't working, I think that's a proper legislative discussion. I'm in favor of that. I don't think they just came up with what they thought sounded like the best reason to shut down the government because they want to fight. I'm sort of a political realist. They don't really want this. They know they're not going to get this. They just want to shut down the government, don't they?
It is definitely in Chuck Schumer's, advantageous benefit to shut down the government. He got a shellacking in the spring when he voted to simply keep the government open. I always find it so ironic when a Republican majority passes a clean CR and Democrats don't want to shut down the government when regularly they absolutely don't want to because the horrible impact that it would have on the federal workforce, right? There's no talk of that now. But in terms of why they're doing it now, I think it's also really important to point out that these subsidies, the Democrats set to expire at the end of the year. They didn't set them to expire on October 1st at the end of September. The reason they're making this a shutdown play is so that they can lock in insurer profits for the following year. If these subsidies do get extended or reformed in any way come December, due to the fact that insurers have to send their premium notices, starting October 1st.
You just, you unlocked the key for me because I've been wondering, this is just regular order stuff. If they want to negotiate for this, they do it in the appropriate committee. But now you just explained it to me. They're just doing a rollover before open season.
Exactly, because it's October 1 that the insurers have to send their letters. So that's why the Democrats are making this fake urgency around the situation, but they can't even stand having their insurer friends miss out on 1 year of $40 billion in revenue.
Now you're the senior liaison, right? So is this going to work? I think Thune is not going to bend. I do not think the Republicans are going to bend. They'll let the Democrats close the government for as long as they want. That's what I think. You got 30 seconds. What do you think?
I think that's the best move. I think putting American patients and families over insurer profits is the way to go. And Senator Thune has really come forth and said, this is the Democrats' problem. They created it. They need to fix it.
Lauren, great to see you. Thank you for joining me. Americans for Prosperity, great sponsor of the Hugh Hewitt Show. They always have the facts, and the light bulb goes on occasionally, even when you're slow with math like me, because of people like Lauren Stewart. Thank you, Lauren. Vic Mattis, co-host of the Getting Hammered podcast and arts and culture editor of the Washington Free Beacon, joins us as he does each week at this time. Vic, I missed the quarterly episode of Getting Hammered, and it was about Charlie. Is that what that was about?
Hello, Hugh. We had a lot to cover, as you can imagine, and I made jokes about us having a lightning round where we talked about the Coldplay concert and Cracker Barrel and Sydney Sweeney. But I would say about 80% of the show was, of course, on a very serious subject, which was the shooting death of Charlie Kirk. And this was released last Friday. You could still check it out, obviously. So it was before the memorial service. That's correct.
Now, I want to talk to you about after the memorial service. I watched it all from the time the music almost ended right through the end of the President Erica leaving. And I was continually amazed, especially by sort of the back-to-back explicit Christian witnesses of two Catholics, Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance, which kind of boxed out the Christian nationalist idiocy. And then Erica. What did you make of this? I think it's probably the largest evangelical witnessing event ever seen in history.
That's right. Some of our friends, I believe Abe Greenwald talked about this in the commentary podcast. It was like a Christian revival. I loved how unabashed it was about Charlie's faith. And I think it's a general tendency, as you know, Hugh, among Catholics. We don't do a really good job of evangelizing. We don't get out there and talk to. No, that's not our cup of tea, as you know. And this is something that was obviously Charlie Kirk's strong suit. And I really appreciated listening to J.D. Vance, who I believe is a convert, talk about sort of being able to talk more about his Christian faith and to a certain extent his Catholic faith more than he ever has, and venturing out there. And obviously you look at somebody like Charlie Kirk, who was unafraid and was willing to obviously go out there, talk about it, and willing to die for his faith. And so that itself was very inspiring. I mean, it was. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this, a sort of memorial service for following a political assassination in a very long time.
Now, I wrote a column for Fox today saying the news doesn't know what to do with this because they don't have a lot of people in the newsroom that are believers in the objective truth of the resurrection. And so they don't know what to do. So our friends at the Wall Street Journal, and they are our friends, their headline is Marco Rubio's Charlie Kirk message. The Secretary of State hits political notes that the young need to hear. They didn't want to deal with salvation history, and I think that's true across the board. They don't know how to write about religion. They don't know who to ask.
Yes, Hugh, I was reminded of our late friend Mike Cromarty, who used to be at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and he ran that Faith Angle Forum. And the whole point of Mike's bringing together journalists to talk about faith is because it's something that they don't often do, but a lot of Americans still believe in a religion, and certainly I believe it's at least 60% of this country is still Christian. And Mike would talk about these reporters listening very intently to his messages and his citing Paul's letter to the Corinthians. And afterwards, they'd come up to Mike and say, "Now, that was a really interesting passage there. Who is this Paul? Like, so where is he from? From the Corinthians? Where is that exactly?" You know, so they really don't know.
Here's Tina Nguyen on MSNBC the day after cut number 2.
What you are seeing here is a movement called Christian nationalism that merges Christianity as it's been practiced in America for, centuries with a very specific interpretation of what the founding fathers wanted, what Aristotle wanted, going all the way back to the ancients. You saw Larry Arnn, who is the president of Hillsdale College and a proponent of this strain of interpretation of the Bible, merge Christianity and protecting the Western civilization values into one and the same thing. It's a very somewhat convoluted argument, but if you distill it into the right talking points, it really hits you in the patriotic heart area.
So Vic, that's so bad it's funny. Larry's an Episcopalian. He's a Straussian. And it's Western Civ 101.
Yeah.
It's just,
that
do these
was
people not know anything?
No, that was rather painful for you to have subjected me to right now, Hugh. So thank you for that. It really is telling how little these people know about a vast swath of this country. I often think now, when they say that, they like to get along with most people and it's just the extremists that they have strong opinions about. And then certainly when it comes to tolerance, like things that we cannot tolerate are extremist views. And I keep on thinking, wait till they find out that there's still a chunk of this country that believes in traditional marriage between a man and a woman. Oh my goodness, they're going to be apoplectic about that. So there, again, there's such a large divide, and obviously this is something that Charlie Kirk was trying to do to bring these people, at least create some awareness. I mean, bringing, not necessarily you have to come to his particular faith, but at least acknowledging that there's a good chunk of this country that still believes in a higher power. And it didn't start with Larry Arnott Hillsdale.
No, although they want to build on it. Let me ask, closing, Vic, the after effects of this will be what? What do you think?
It's really hard to tell. I mean, there's a part of me that likes to be hopeful. Whenever something horrible like this happens and you see all these awful people go on social media, and I'm disgusted by it, you're disgusted by it. And I always say to myself, and I say to my wife, please tell me that there are more people in this country like us and feel the way we do than people who delight in the death of others, because it's just dark and it's a dark place to be. And you see these people who are wishing ill and delight in the death of Charlie Kirk. They're not happy people, Hugh. And I think that they need to try to venture out and seek that happiness. And that's going to be a jump. But I think he might have started something here, Charlie Kirk. I mean, hearing lots of people talking about opening up all these new chapters of Talking Point USA, and people who have never watched any of his videos before, and they've come up to me and they said, I had this idea of what he was, some sort of a provocateur, and I listened to him at debate, and honestly, he was doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, forever young. I am reminded of every funeral for a veteran who died during the Long War, and it's always heartbreaking, but it's not on video, and it's not as immediate this. So I'm hoping it brings to a halt violence, at least for a period of time. The way that I heard John Podhoretz point out that when the Pope forgave the man who tried to kill him in 1982, that had a profound impact on bringing an era of assassination. I thought that was very well said. So maybe the best
forgiveness.
That's
is
the
key.
best that could be done. Yeah. No. Vic Mattis, Victorino Mattis on X. Listen to Getting Hammered. I'll be doing that tomorrow morning out of my trundle. Thank you, Vic. That's Joan Baez, Forever Young. And I play it because when young people die young, they always stay forever young. That's why I picked that music. Now, I told people last night, especially when I brought up Sophia, that I've been in the business for 35 years on air. So 3 times as long as Charlie, maybe 4 times as long as Charlie, with 1/4 of the impact of Charlie. And that's not going to change because of his sort of clip file and because of the infrastructure he built out. Incredibly effective young man. And Erica, who I do not know, will, I'm sure, succeed. And I'm sure people are going to use that. But I do think, again, I'm going to post the opening monologue to pastors, priests, ministers of all sorts, rabbis, Seventh-day Adventists, people who worship on Saturday or Sunday. Just be prepared for new people asking new questions for the next few weeks. I got to take my relief factor. Been a long couple of days, beginning on Saturday, traveling. I did love going to Connecticut, and I love talking to, for example, Commander John Lynch, I believe, is a retired submariner, and I think he's running for Congress down there. And John and I were talking about electric boat in Connecticut. Electric boat matters so much to the future of this country. And I was talking to John Fuller, who runs the station, about electric. They employ 15,000 people. They build the Virginia class. They are building the Columbia class. They repair them. They're going to get bigger. They're probably going to have 25,000 people. If you will go into that business, you're going to work for the rest of your life. And those are our killer advantage against the Chi-Coms. And I love learning about it. Everyone in Connecticut, there aren't a lot of Republicans in Connecticut, but they were all there. And I loved talking to them last night. But it was a long day and a long bit of travel, so I've got my Icarian curcumin resveratrol omega, my relief factor right here, and I do what I do every day. And if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you see me take it every day. I was telling John that the only sponsors I allow are the people that I use or I believe in, like Relief Factor. I use it, and I want you to believe in me. I want you to understand it's truly a great product. and you can go a long way and get a lot done. I did do my 10 on Saturday. I told you on Friday, and I was off yesterday with Alex sitting in for me. I did get my 10 in. A little bit sore on Sunday, but not for very long. I was juggling a lot of things. Watched the entire Charlie service. The Browns were on in the background. They managed to beat the Green Bay Packers on a time-ending field goal by Mr. Schmidt. Bravo. Guardians won. Guardians lost, but they are in the third place in the wild card. They're in right now. Got a 3-game series opening up against the Tigers, and then I had to go to Connecticut. So it's been a busy couple of days, but Dwayne and Harley and Adam have held down the show, and Alex Marlowe was fabulous. And I got a lot of more to cover with you, including Donald Trump at the UNGA.
Do you think that NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace?
Yes, I do.
Morning glory and evening grace, America. That was President Trump sitting down with President Zelensky, giving an A to B answer. I'm starting to call President Trump the A to B president. He doesn't take any, except in the weave when he's doing his speeches. He just answers the question. I'm joined by Brett Baer. Brett, were you surprised by the president's rather direct response there?
Yeah, there was no nuance. Good afternoon. I think it was pretty cut and dry. And, it is a change for him. I think some of the things he said today have been different in the way that he's approaching Russia. He is now saying in a Truth Social post after that meeting with the Ukrainian president, who, by the way, we have on a special report at 6 p.m., he said that Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, could fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form, saying that Russia's been fighting aimlessly, its economy is crashing, and Ukraine should take action now with the help of Europe, and U.S. is going to work with NATO to get them the weapons they need.
It's jaw, and it didn't work, so now it's war. Brett, when you sit down with Zelensky tonight, President Zelensky, is that going to be at their United Nations facility? Is he coming over to the studio? What's he doing, and where are you sitting for that interview?
In the studio in New York, 1211. And we've got the building's on total lockdown here.
I'll
we
bet.
supposed to having a little bit earlier, but it got delayed a bit. But we're getting ready to sit down here shortly as he makes his way over from the UN. As you know,
how long are you blocking for that? And how are you going to go about it to the extent you can tell me without tipping the hand for the people who are listening right now?
Well, most importantly, I want to get the inside of his perception of what he took away from the meeting with President Trump. And, after all that we've seen with Zelensky and President Trump and that horrific devolving Oval Office meeting that I sat down with Zelensky right after in Washington, D.C., I think their relationship has changed, and I'd like to delve into that. I'd like to, get an assessment of where things are and what he's hoping for, and a realistic thought process of where he thinks the war is. I mean, there are some pressing questions internally about his support in Ukraine, but that's the basic premise of my blueprint.
Now, I've got a real question. I'll ask Dr. Rebecca Heinrichs of Hudson a little bit later today. Does she worry about Putin using a tactical nuke? Because he's getting so completely adventurous. These airplanes are not mistakes. Do you think they're mistakes, Brett? You covered the Pentagon.
No.
You know that you don't make mistakes like this.
No. And it's escalated exponentially since the Alaska summit meeting. And then the numbers kept on going up with drone incursions, and then the 3 jets that go into Estonia last week. And then ever since he met with President Xi in China, the numbers have even increased further as far as the boldness of the attacks and the boldness of going into NATO countries' territory. So that is a big discussion at the UN today. In fact, there's a ministerial starting right now where Secretary Rubio is talking about Ukraine and incursions as well.
Are you staying up there all week?
I'm going to be here tomorrow. I'm going to interview the Syrian president, the new Syrian president. Yep.
That's a new one.
That's a new one.
You sat down with an Al-Qaeda guy before, Brett Baer?
I have not, but there's a whole different list of questions for that one.
Well, I don't envy that. I thought maybe the Emir of Qatar would be looking you up because he's a buddy. I thought the line would be out the door, in fact, for Fox News this week because you're become the go-to guy for international leaders. Do you go to the events at night? Because I've never been for Unga Week. I understand it's crazy. Do you like it?
It is crazy. It's tough getting across town, Hugh. I mean, it could take you forever. It's better to hoof it and just walk. It's it's interesting. It is. You do get access to leaders. I am going to go to an event tomorrow night where there'll be a number of leaders and some that I'm really trying to get on the show, like Prime Minister Meloni of Italy. And so that interaction, face to face, is good for setting up interviews down the road.
And there's also a developing split in NATO between the Eastern European bloc, Hungary, maybe Czechoslovakia is going to go that way, and Poland versus old NATO and recognizing the Palestinian state. This was not a good development for NATO this week, for France and Britain. Have you had much conversation with people about that?
Yeah, a little bit, but you're right. It was not. And listen, I think that the president was pretty pointed in his speech today about the need for European nations to get off the Russian oil spigot and natural gas, and in order for this all to work. And he said he was even going to call his friend Viktor Orban from Hungary to make that happen.
He also said to any terrorists smuggling poison in the United States, we will blow you out of existence. So it's sort of a warning to the speedboats of the Caribbean. He covered a lot of ground today. So now I want to ask you, Brett, about Sunday. I don't know that you were in Phoenix. I wasn't. What did you make of that?
I think it was very, very powerful. I think it was obviously Erica Kirk stole the day and the show, and that moment of forgiving the shooter, I think will go down in history as one of the most amazing moments, that close to the assassination of her husband. I thought it was powerful to see all the cabinet members and obviously President Trump and his message. I think the powerful image of him hugging Erica. I do think, there were times when I think, he may have missed the moment on unity because he just was being him about, I can't say that I pull for my opponents or want to see them succeed. That's Trump being Trump. But I think overall, it was a really powerful.
That was the weave meets the eulogy, but I thought Secretary Rubio and Vice President Vance were extraordinary witnesses to their Christian faith. It used to be that Bishop Fulton Sheen would get 30 million people on a Sunday night in the days of three networks, but they had 20 million people in a day of internet, so it's going to be 100 million people before. It could be 200 million people watch all or part of that. I think it will have a long-term consequence for many people's individual lives that we won't see. So, Brett, to conclude this, Ambassador Waltz got confirmed last week. Have you run into him yet?
I have. I've talked to him. He is, running around, represented the U.S., obviously, in the UN Security Council meetings to start off this week. As much as the Trump administration is not a big fan of the United Nations, as you heard from the president's speech today, I do think that they think there is hope to try to reform it. And they think Waltz is the guy that can do it with all his experience.
I hope you are right. Brett Baer will be watching for your interview with President Zelensky tonight on Special Report right off the top of the hour. So don't miss that, America, on Fox News at 6 p.m. Thank you, Brett Baer. I want to let everyone know I've got a wonderful sponsor in Consumer Cellular. And I live under FCC rules, so I'm kind of laughing about Jimmy Kimmel complaining about them. The FCC rule requires me to tell you that when I'm doing a sponsored spot embedded in my broadcast time, I've got to identify the sponsor, Consumer Cellular, and I always do. I also have a Consumer Cellular phone, and I can tell you about the deal because I know about it, but I want you to know I'm complying with FCC rules. They're not onerous. I've been doing it for years. Jimmy Kimmel ought to apologize tonight. I don't think he will, but we'll see if he does. But let me, in the meantime, tell you about consumercellular.com/Hugh. If you're a senior citizen, if you're 50 years or older, it is highly unlikely that you need unlimited data plans. You can probably get by with 5 gigs or 10 gigs and save yourself a world of money. But if you want unlimited data, Consumer Cellular is your answer if you're over 50. They will give you 2 unlimited lines for $60 or $30 each line, unlimited data, as much as you want. You can better manage the cost of living, your essential expenses by using Consumer Cellular. And it takes about 20 minutes to switch. You can have savings without sacrifice. Call 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. And use my code HUGH25. HUGH and the number 25. When you call 1-800-411-4454, there'll be one button to push, and then you'll be talking to a real live person in the U.S. Their service centers are all in the U.S. It takes about 20 minutes. You keep your number, get a new number, keep your contacts, lose them, get a new device, lose your device. But check your plan before you call. Save yourself some money. And don't forget to use Hugh25 or go to consumercellular.org/Hugh. Steve Hilton's going to be the next governor of California. If there's any common sense left in the Golden State, he joins us now from Berkeley. Steve, welcome. Are you headed to the campus tonight?
Yeah, in fact, sooner than that. I'll be there in about half an hour. We're doing an event.
And who are you talking to, and what are you going to talk about?
Well, all comers. I tell you, Hugh, we in fact, this is something that I spoke to Charlie about, right at the beginning of the campaign, and I asked him how he got started with his campus tours, because as part of my campaign, I've been trying to take the message that we need change in California everywhere. And so we had created a little, if you like, my version of Prove Me Wrong. And the way that he said, well, how would you put it, Steve? And so the way I put it is, I put forward a policy argument, and then I say, what's wrong with that? So that's our little branding. And the particular proposition that we're putting forward today on campus is cut climate regulations to make housing affordable. Because all these students who cannot afford anywhere to live, who can't even imagine the dream of owning their own home, which used to be the California dream, the main driver of the fact that we got the highest housing costs in the country is this climate agenda, as they call it. And there's no way we're going to get costs down for anyone in California until we abandon this ridiculous climate extremism. So that's the conversation I'm looking forward to having with the students and anyone else who wants to come along. We're working with the college Republicans and looking forward to a lively event this afternoon.
Now, Steve Hilton, you've built a lot of momentum early. I want to know whether Prop 50 is an opportunity or a hurdle for you. It's the special election to jam down Gavin's redistricting, destroy the Republican Party initiative, and Arnold's pushing back, you're pushing back. Does that help you? Does that hurt you in the campaign?
No, look, it's all hands on deck. So putting aside anybody's individual campaign, we got to stop this. And in fact, I want to stop it even getting to the ballot, Hugh, because this is going to cost $250 million at least of taxpayer money just to have this ridiculous special election that nobody wanted for, nobody asked for, and is effectively a corrupt contribution to Gavin Newsom's presidential campaign. That's the only reason he's doing it. So I filed a lawsuit in federal court a couple of weeks ago. We're actually filing this week an injunction to try and stop it even happening. It clearly violates the US Constitution and the California Constitution's Equal Protection Clause, which states very clearly one person, one vote has been defined as every vote has equal value. That means districts have to be roughly equal in population. They have no idea about that, the way they've drawn these maps. And right now, if this goes through, the numbers are so stark. If Gavin Newsom's new maps go through, it will, based on last year's voting in the presidential election in California, it would take 193,000 votes to elect a Democrat to Congress in California, 1.52 million votes to elect a Republican. A Democrat vote would be worth 8 times a Republican vote. It's obscene, and it has to be stopped. So we're doing everything we can.
I want to go back to housing because I was in Connecticut last night talking to the Connecticut GOP on behalf of their state party, and they had people move to California and move back to Connecticut. Connecticut's not exactly a tax wonderland either, and the property taxes are high, but they can buy houses in Connecticut. They can't buy houses in California. So I imagine everyone I moved there when I was 22, and then I went back when I was 32. It was possible to do it. You had to stretch a little bit, but I don't know where anyone buys a house on the coast.
Exactly, or anywhere, actually. The median house price in California, the midpoint, is around $1 million. It's
Gosh.
absolutely off the charts. I mean, higher in metro areas like in the Bay Area where I am and so on. And that basic thing, look, I remember, Hugh, my parents were Hungarian immigrants. We didn't have much money. Back in England, I started a business, made some money. I literally still can remember that first day where I bought an apartment in London and I walked across the threshold for the first time, feeling that sense of achievement. And it's a crime that that's being taken away from this generation. It's entirely Democrat policies. All of it is avoidable. It's these and driven by the climate policies, which say that the only acceptable kind of building is apartment buildings in the middle of town. You can't have single family homes. The building codes of the endless additions of regulations driven by the climate stuff. None of it makes any difference to global temperatures, of course. So it's all completely pointless. All it does is make everything more expensive. And we just got to confront them with that. I think for too long we've gone along with it and said, oh, yes, it's fine. A little bit of climate regulation. No, the whole architecture of climate elitism, which is what it is, needs to be ripped down in California.
Have you also, because I spoke over the weekend with my friends in Mandeville Canyon, Len and Judy,
Yeah.
whose house did not get burned down, but they evacuated to stay with us for a couple of weeks while they were worried about it. Nothing's being rebuilt save one or two
Right.
houses. That's all Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom. Is that an issue on the campaign trail?
It is, even for people who don't live there. And it is a massive issue in Los Angeles. I'm there often, and people cannot believe. And there's real rage at what's going on. And beyond LA, though, people are seeing that. And it's just an example of the total dysfunction and lack of attention to basic things. Because what's going on while all that is happening? This Prop 50. Gavin Newsom spending his time trolling President Trump and glorying and luxuriating in the approval of the left-wing activists for his Twitter, posting on X like President Trump and putting out ridiculous swag and thinking that's funny when people's lives have been destroyed and they're not doing anything to help. So it's actually a really, really, for regular people in California, it is an example of how totally detached from reality this corrupt elite has become. That's what you get after 15 years of one-party rule, and that's why we got to have change next year in California.
So let's close by making sure where people can go to find you, to sign up, to volunteer, or to contribute. What's the website, and how's it look for volunteers, and and can you use them?
Oh, for goodness. Yes. I love you saying that. We're on the road the whole time. We're doing all these events and we get people to sign up the whole time. We're just getting organized. Our new volunteer army is just taking shape. SteveHiltonforGovernor.com, FOR, SteveHiltonforGovernor.com. There's a button called says Get Involved, and we're building that army. Everyone can help wherever you live. You can post things on social media. You can call people. You can write letters. There's a ton of stuff we're getting ready for people to do. SteveHiltonforGovernor.com.
Have you touched base with Pete Wilson about saving the state that he loves so much? Because, I was telling people last night, Pete turned that state around. It could be done again if you know what you're doing.
Exactly. He's a wonderful man. I had the honor of meeting him. We had a long meeting, hours long, 3 hours, I believe. I've spoken to him on the phone a few times. He's always got fantastic advice. He's so beloved in California. Everywhere I go, people love him. And actually, his team was very strong. One of his top legal guys is part of my team now, because I'm really doing that work, preparing for becoming governor and understanding exactly what I can do with the powers of the governor to make change happen, even though we're likely to have a hostile legislature. So the Wilson
You never
team...
know what happens. I met my wife at a Pete Wilson fundraiser. So tonight at this event, you never know what you could launch, Steve Hilton. Have a good event at Berkeley tonight. Say hello to the youngsters and to all the people from Turning Point. I hope they turn out for Steve Hilton at Berkeley tonight and throughout the state. SteveHiltonforGovernor.com, FOR, SteveHiltonforGovernor.com. Go sign up, volunteer, contribute, get involved in saving the Golden State. One of our great sponsors came to mind when I was talking to Steve Hilton about the cost of housing, AndrewandTodd.com. Interest rates have reached a 3-year low. So for the first time in 3 years, you can buy a house for about 6% on a 30-year fixed mortgage. But you got to call Andrew and Todd first, 888-888-1172. AndrewandTodd.com are an office of Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They are a bank. They lend you the money to buy homes. They also do the underwriting, soup to nuts. You call up on the phone, 888-888-1172. You'll get Andrew Del Rey or you'll get Todd Avakian, and you'll tell them, I'm a first-time home buyer. I don't know what I'm doing. That's fine. They've dealt with millions of you. Or you're a senior citizen and you want a reverse mortgage because you got to get some equity out of your house, but you don't want to make another mortgage payment. That's fine. They've dealt with thousands of you. Or you're a veteran, you don't want to put any money down, or you just want to buy a second home or an investment property anywhere in the United States, 888-888-1172. Now, AndrewandTodd.com have served thousands of my customers, but they have served me, and they have served Dwayne, and they have served my children, and they've served lots of people in the Salem Media Company, because people move all the time, and sometimes you don't get to pick when you move. And the mortgage rates might not be great. But the good news is the supply side is loosening up. Talked to a realtor in Connecticut last night. More houses on the market. That's good for buyers. And interest rates are down. So don't delay another day. 888-888-1172, andrewandtodd.com. Let's give a listen to President Trump at the UNGA today, United Nations General Assembly, cut number 20.
According to the Council of Europe, in 2024, almost 50% of inmates in German prisons were foreign nationals or migrants. In Austria, the number was 53% of the people in prisons were from places that weren't from where they are now. In Greece, the number was 54%, and in Switzerland, beautiful Switzerland, 72% of the people in prisons are from outside of Switzerland. When your prisons are filled with so-called asylum seekers who repaid kindness, and that's what they did. They repaid kindness with crime. It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now.
I think everybody in that room is a globalist, except Mike Waltz. I saw Ambassador Waltz sitting there. Everyone in that room is a globalist, and they all hate what he's saying, and they all know it's true. That's why Europe is turning upside down. Then he did a double tap, cut number 24.
If you don't get away from this green scam, your country is going to fail. And I'm really good at predicting things, you know. They actually said during the campaign they had a hat, the best-selling hat. Trump was right about everything. And I don't say that in a braggadocious way, but it's true. I've been right about everything. And I'm telling you that if you don't get away from the green energy scam, your country is going to fail. And if you don't stop people that you've never seen before, that you have nothing in common with, your country is going to fail.
It got tougher, cut number 27.
The entire globalist concept of asking successful industrialized nations to inflict pain on themselves and radically disrupt their entire societies must be rejected completely and totally, and it must be immediate. That's why in America I withdrew from the fake Paris Climate Accord, where, by the way, America was paying so much more than every country. Others weren't paying. China didn't have to pay until 2030. Russia was given an old standard that was easy to meet, a 1990 standard. But for the United States, we're supposed to pay like $1 trillion. And I said, this is another scam. The fact is, the United States has been taken advantage of by the world for many, many years, but not any longer, as you probably noticed. I unleashed
One more clip, cut number 29.
In honor of this momentous anniversary, I hope that all countries who find inspiration in our example will join us in renewing our commitment, values, and those values, really, that we hold so dear together. Let us defend free speech and free expression. Let us protect religious liberty, including for the most persecuted religion on the planet today. It's called Christianity. And let us safeguard our sovereignty and cherish qualities that have made each of our nations so special, incredible, and extraordinary.
I think he did a fine job because as I was talking to Bobby, who was driving me around, he's an A to B guy. I finally decided that he just goes from point A to point B, and he doesn't mince words. He's direct. He's absolutely authentic. He's Trump. And the world got a good dose of him today. And if he says he's going to shoot down Russian airplanes that go into NATO countries, he's going to shoot them down. So, Vladimir Putin, forewarned, you are fairly on notice. Don't do it. Byron York is senior correspondent for the Washington Examiner. He's also a Fox News contributor. Byron, the temptation for most news people is to immediately turn the news cycle and talk about Jimmy Kimmel Tonight or the president at the UN or sitting down with Zelensky. I want to go back to Sunday and talk about it with you. What did you make of that event in Phoenix?
Well, it was an incredible event. I mean, I've just never seen anything like that. I was not there. I watched it. But I've just absolutely never seen anything like that for a variety of reasons. One, at the heart of it all, of course, was the death of Charlie Kirk, the speech that his widow gave, that whole thing. In addition, there were so many political figures there speaking so openly about religious faith that it was just an absolutely extraordinary event. I thought that the closing to Marco Rubio's speech, about 1 minute, in which he basically explained the story of Jesus, was just incredibly powerful and something that clearly came quite naturally from Rubio. I mean, has any Secretary of State gotten up and said something like that in such a
And National Security Advisor, by the way, Secretary of State, and he's a cradle Catholic who spent some years in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints when his family moved to Las Vegas. Then he was in an evangelical congregation in Miami, and he's returned to Catholicism. So he's been on both sides of the river, and he's bilingual in Christianity terms, Protestant and Catholic. And I just thought it was fabulous. And I think, although Bishop Fulton Sheen used to get 30 million people a week when there were 3 stations, I think that had to have been the most watched Christian service of both mourning and celebration, witness, and revival that has ever happened in the history of the world.
I would imagine. And, of course, finally, he's the president of the United States. And, I mean, Trump is such an extraordinary man. He's an offbeat eulogist. Let's just say that. I mean,
he did the weave with a eulogy.
He did the weave. He was going into tariffs and stuff. But of course he comes back to Charlie Kirk and the issue at heart. And then at the end, when he has Erica Kirk come up to join him, and they're just standing there silently while America the Beautiful plays, just a stunning moment. I mean, Trump has an incredible sense of the present, and that was really proof of it.
I heard the fellows over at Commentary yesterday talking about the fact he is so authentic, and she was so authentically vulnerable and forgiving that together it was an overpowering kind of message. Now, last night I was in Connecticut doing an event for my wonderful affiliate up there, and John and George and some friends, and the young lady who runs TPUSA at UConn, they've doubled their membership in 2 weeks. Now, part of that is emotional response. Some of it will burn off. Some of it will grow. What do you think the lasting impact of TPUSA can be expected to be? I think the Christian witness is far more significant, but I'm interested in the politics for a moment.
Yeah. First of all, Charlie Kirk had become a much more skilled and respected political operative in recent years. Always associated, of course, with young people. Basically, in the 2024 campaign, the Trump campaign decided not to spend zillions of dollars on Get Out the Vote, and they essentially farmed out some very key aspects of Get Out the Vote to Turning Point USA. There were political veterans who said, boy, that is a big mistake. These Turning Point USA guys know nothing about getting out the vote. And, look what happened. Trump wins. So Kirk had really raised his status as a political operative and strategist. So that's an important part. That organization is an important part of what he leaves. On the other hand, I think that all of the admiring testimony and discussion of him in the past 2 weeks has really suggested this was a very unique individual. It's really hard to continue an organization that is built on the talents of an extremely unique individual. And we'll have to see what happens there.
Almost every evangelist, and President Trump called Charlie an evangelist, he's right, has not been able to pass the torch. Billy Graham, Franklin Graham is quite a good evangelist, but his Samaritan's Purse work is what carries on. Greg Laurie, I don't know that he can do Harvest beyond that. Most evangelists cannot do that. Amy Semple McPherson, but it's such a hybrid thing that I don't know. I just know that it will be a long time till we. I knew Charlie when he was 19 years old on the campus of Colorado Christian University. He was raw. Now he's this fully developed man of action and purpose. It's very hard to replace. And I don't know that there's anyone who immediately steps up. In my mind, Erica Kirk is, of course, going to run TPUSA, but it's a different skill set from what Charlie had. She's not going to go out and argue with people on stages.
No, and this is, I mean, in a larger sense, when the Republican Party looks at Donald Trump and says, this is an absolutely unique, historically unique individual. It's not like there's going to be another one anytime soon. And what the post-Trump Republican Party will look like, who knows? But it's going to be a lot of people trying to sort of live up to something that can't actually even be lived up to, which is the
whose bench would you rather have? AOC and Jasmine Crockett and Mamdani, or Vice President Vance, Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth, Tom Cotton, Elise Stefanik, Ted Cruz?
Yeah, that was a very impressive group that we saw at the memorial service, and in general, that's a really impressive list of people right there. The Trump group.
And do you think that the Democrats have gone over the cliff? I do. I'm actually I think AOC peaked and crashed when she was so awful to Charlie Kirk last week on the House floor. Preston Brooks attacking Sumner sort of thing.
Something really interesting going on. We are, obviously Democrats should be, or the opposition party should be confident going into the midterms because they're normally going to pick up seats, and they don't have to pick up many, like literally a handful, to win control of the House. So you would think there'd be some sort of optimism. And indeed, the generic ballot, if the vote were held today, would you vote for the Republican or the Democrat to represent you in Congress, has been looking okay for Democrats. But there are a lot of voices of caution saying, look at every single big issue. And when pollsters ask, do you trust Republicans or Democrats to handle this issue more? Republicans are leading in all the big, important things.
Good takeaway. Byron York, follow him on X at Byron York. Thank you, friend. I'm Hugh Hewitt, back after a day in Connecticut. Thanks again to Alex Marlowe for sitting in for me. Relief Factor got me there, got me back, got my 10 miles in on Saturday. Great 10 miles, beautiful day, and I love the fall. You can go a long way, and you can feel good when you take your Relief Factor. Now, because I'm FCC regulated, I'm going to talk about that next hour, about Brendan Carr and Jimmy Kimmel and all that. I'm going to open up the show with that next hour. I have to tell you, I'm in the Relief Factor studio. It's sponsored by Relief Factor. But I also want you to know, I take it every day. I take it on air. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you saw me do it. You hear me do it if you're listening on the Salem Radio Network or one of our great affiliates across the United States. And the reason I do that is to emphasize to you, I don't take any supplements besides Relief Factor. And that's because I don't need them. Been blessed with good health for all these years, and trundling helps that, I think. And I think Relief Factor provides all that I need. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. And the 4 natural supplements that most doctors will tell you how to take, and they work together to combine with your body's anti-inflammatory system. You don't have to live with the minor aches and pains that come with a lot of sitting around or a lot of walking around or flying, the dreaded overhead demand, all that stuff. All of travel sort of been jumbled and jambled as events change here and there, and so I've been doing a lot of that and thinking about flights and running between different things. But I always have my Relief Factor with me, because no matter where I am, it works. It costs $19.95 for a 3-week starter pack, 1-800-4 and the word relief, 1-800-4 and the word relief, and get the $19.95 3-week starter pack, or go to their website and find that starter pack at relieffactor.com. relieffactor.com. I want you to hear Donald Trump at On Good Today, cut number 22.
To protect our citizens, I've also designated multiple savage drug cartels as far as and you see this, and you see it happening right before your eyes. Let's put it this way. People don't like taking big loads of drugs in boats anymore. There aren't too many boats that are traveling on the seas by Venezuela. They tend not to want to travel very quickly anymore. And we've virtually stopped drugs coming into our country by sea. We call them the water drugs. They kill hundreds of thousands of people. I've also designated multiple savage drug cartels as far as foreign terrorist organizations, along with two bloodthirsty transnational gangs, probably the worst gangs anywhere in the world, MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. Tren de Aragua is from Venezuela, by the way. Such organizations torture, maim, mutilate, and murder with impunity. They're the enemies of all humanity. For this reason, we've recently begun using the supreme power of the United States military to destroy Venezuelan terrorists and trafficking networks led by Nicolas Maduro. To every terrorist thug smuggling poisonous drugs into the United States of America, please be warned that we will blow you out of existence. That's what we're doing. We have no choice.
They're paying attention at the UN. He's an A to B guy. I'm Hugh Hewitt, glad to be back. Thanks to Alex Marlowe for sitting in for me yesterday when I was in Connecticut. The news came yesterday that Jimmy Kimmel will be back on the air tonight for ABC Disney, but that I think about half of the stations that carry him are not going to carry him. Nexstar and Sinclair are not bringing him back. Got horrible ratings. And I don't care. I couldn't care less if ABC wastes money on him, if Disney wants to insult the half the country that thinks he's a moron. It doesn't matter to me. I do want to, however, clear up for you folks something about Chairman Carr of the Federal Communications Commission, who I've only met once virtually over this program. Don't know him. Very smart lawyer. Been at the FCC for a while. The FCC was established in 1934, and it was the successor to the Federal Radio Commission, which was established in 1927. So the commission predates the progressive outburst. I mean, it's post-Wilson, but it's pre-FDR. It's not New Deal. It's Hoover, and it's pre-Depression. And it came out of an actual engineering problem. Radio, like television, regular television, not cable, broadcasts over the broadcast spectrum. And if you don't regulate via licensing which part of the spectrum a station can use, I got started, I'll use AM 640, more stimulating talk radio in LA. It was my first radio station, 50,000 clear watt channel, meaning that you could keep it at 50,000 all night long. And I would do the Saturday night and Sunday night shift when I got started in 1990, and I could be heard in North Carolina from LA. I mean, that's just what AM radio does with airwaves, and it's just big booming signals. But most signals have to turn down, if they're on the AM band, turn down at night, or they'll interfere with other signals. FM is different. Translators have changed the technology. But the Federal Communications Commission is a traffic cop first. And you got to understand, people are colliding with each other on the signals. And I have a San Diego station, 1170, that for years has been, mugged by this giant signal out of Tijuana, and I think they fixed that finally, but I'm not sure. I can't keep up with it. I'm on 400 different affiliates. I have no idea what's going on with the signal on each of them. Some have great signals, some have less than great signals, but they're all regulated by the Federal Communications Commission. And the Federal Communications Commission is created by statute, and the statute says it shall issue licenses in the public interest. It uses that phrase repeatedly, in the public interest. Now, it might be that the statute is unconstitutional. Might be. I don't think so. It depends on how public interest is regulated. It can't be viewpoint non-neutral. That's a First Amendment baseline rule, but the public interest might also require that you not lie about the assassin of a very public figure in the immediate aftermath of his death, like Jimmy Kimmel. You might be able to have a narrow definition like that. Either way, Brendan Carr, the chairman, on a podcast said we can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way. What he's referring to is the renewal of the license process, I think. I'm not sure. I didn't talk to him. I didn't hear the podcast. But every radio station, every local affiliate, has a book where the public can register their applause or their boos about the airwaves and how they're being used, and the FCC take that into account. The FCC also has lots of rules about sponsorship, which I tell you about. Whenever you hear me say this is a sponsor, that's because it's an FCC rule. They have rules about words you may not use because there are probably kids in the back of the car, and decency rules apply. And television has its own set of rules, and the FCC has all sorts of rules, and I've always lived within them. Never had an FCC complaint. It's very easy to serve the public interest because the fairness doctrine went down in 1989, thank goodness, because talk radio started in 1989 with Rush. He built them all. I've just got a Nordstrom's in it. And it took off because the FCC had created this fairness doctrine, which was actually prohibiting speech, and Reagan killed it off and got it started, and it was deregulated. But the public interest statute is still there. What the chairman said is he thought the public interest statute had been engaged, and people lost their minds and their heads blew up. Well, Jimmy Kimmel hadn't been barred from being back on the air. He's going back on the air tonight because they think they're going to get decent ratings out of a guy whose show is dead. And maybe they will for a night. Maybe it'll be funny. That would be a change. What I'm here to tell you is Brendan Carr's doing his job. And I heard Senator Cruz and I heard Senator Hawley. I heard some Democrats saying it was thuggish and mafia and mob-like. Senator McConnell didn't like it. Hey, you're the legislators. Change the law. He's the appointee who's given the law to apply. You know what I did not like? Senator Eric Schmidt's book about the censorship in Murphy versus Missouri. It started out as Schmidt versus Biden or Missouri versus Biden. They objected to Fauci, Collins, and the rest of the gang obliging censorship of speech about COVID across social media without any writ. They don't have any writ to do that. The public law doesn't do that. But the FCC has a statute, and the statute should be applied. It should not be applied when you want, when you don't want. Now compare that with what Team Obama cooked up. They didn't like conservative talk radio, didn't like me, didn't like Rush. So they cooked up local content regulations. They proposed them as a rule. It didn't go anywhere. We shot them down because they were designed not to produce local content on local radios, which would have put local radio stations out of business because they can't afford to do it anymore. It's expensive. They'll have a morning show. Like I met Lee and Gary yesterday. They're fabulous morning hosts from my affiliates down in Connecticut. And I thought these guys were fabulous. And they're doing local news, whether it's sports, politics, public affairs, what's going on in the school district, stuff like that. Every station has either a live and local in the morning or a live and local in the afternoon if they can afford it. But you force feed it, you'll put people out of business. And what were they trying to do? They were trying to put people out of business, and they were trying to force syndicated product off the air because the syndicated product that was selling was conservative because NPR destroyed the audience for liberal and left-wing talk radio because it was subsidized. And what Brendan Carr was doing was known as his job. And I understand that left-wingers are going to attack Brendan Carr because it was a diversion from the fact that a lunatic from the left wing, radicalized by the rhetoric of fascism and authoritarianism and hate and negativity, killed Charlie Kirk. And they were desperate to turn the page and turn the attention to Brendan Carr, and it was a little sideshow. I do not understand, and I'll talk with Senator Cruz and Senator Hawley when I get a chance. Hey, don't get mad at Carr. If you don't like the statute, repeal the statute. Now, you can't repeal the statute. You can repeal the public interest portion of it, but you got to keep the licensing. You got to. The market won't work. I heard my friend Charlie Cook talking about the market. The market won't work. The market was what was there in 27 to 34, and it didn't work because people were stepping on each other's signal and no one could hear anything. So you have to license. Now, it's possible that you could just auction to the highest person, but then you have reliance damages. It's very complicated because you build a radio station and you invest millions of dollars and you build up your brand. I'll go back to my first radio station, AM 640 KFI, more stimulating talk radio. It's had the same brand forever. It's not my station. I'm not on it anymore. I don't know who's on it anymore. John and Ken, I don't know. Nihilist extraordinaire. And it was a fine radio station. I like working for them. But they've had the same brand, and they've built that brand, and everyone knows that brand, and people go to it in KNX 1070 and AM 870, The Answer, which is what I'm on in LA right now. And people know brands, and they rely on it. And when they rely on it, you build up equity in your business. You just can't take the license away. So the idea that we're going to re-auction every 10 years, that's really dumb. It doesn't account for reliance damages upon which a capitalist system depends. that you have a contract. And the contract says, provided that you're broadcasting in the public interest, you'll get your license renewed. So when Brendan Carr says, not sure about these affiliate licenses carrying Jimmy Kimmel, he's doing his job, and he's doing it out loud. He's not in secret. Compared with the Biden White House, which had 20 people, along with 66 other people, calling Meta and Google and the old Twitter to tell them to censor people. Done in the darkness, without statutory authority. So, Commissioner Carr, Chairman Carr, good on you. Real conservatives who believe in the rule of law understand that the Constitution invests Article 1 with the authority to pass laws. They passed the Federal Communications Act in 1934, which set up the Federal Communications Commission, and they gave you directives, and it's been amended, and you were doing what you thought was your job, and you didn't actually do anything. You talked about what you might do, and had you done something, it would have been appropriate for that point for Kimmel to try and say, maybe you got me, but he wouldn't have been able to because he wouldn't have had standing or redressability. And he's not on the air tonight on more than half the stations, not because of what Brendan Carr said, because he's a lousy comic with no audience who lives in a blue bubble, and he's not very smart. Not going to call him ignorant, just going to say he's not very smart, and he's definitely not funny. And he has no sense of timing or common decency. That's why his affiliates took him off the air, not Chairman Carr. I'll be right back with Dr. Heinrich, Rebecca Heinrich from the Hudson Institute, talking the UN General Assembly, NATO, and more. Welcome to Rebecca Heinrich. She is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, where she leads their Keystone Defense Initiative, and I've been pleased to partner with her a couple of times on Fox and other places, and I thought we got to get Rebecca here to start talking to us. Rebecca, welcome. I want to begin by asking you about Ashland College, because your old president there was a friend of mine. I went out there and gave a commencement once. What's your connection with Ashland?
So it was a wonderful school to go to. I was an Ashbrook scholar, so I'm from rural Ohio, and I studied political science under then Peter Schramm, the great Peter Schramm, who is the director of the Ashbrook Center, who has since passed away. But it's a great political science program. Highly commend it to anybody who wants to have their children or their grandchildren study the classics from a pro-Western civilization, pro-American perspective. And I have the pleasure of serving on the Ashbrook board there now. So it's a great school.
Well, Carlos is a friend. I gave your commencement once, and I'm from Warren, Ohio. Now, rural Ohio can be either southwest or northwest. Which part were you?
So I am from north central Ohio in a little tiny town. It's Jim Jordan's district, a little rural town. But he wasn't the congressman when I was there. But tiny little farm town of about 1,100 people.
Well, now, no wonder you make such sense. You're a Buckeye. And so I'm glad to welcome a fellow Buckeye into the program. I want to begin by asking you generally about President Trump's remarks at the UN today. We took out after the UN for migration, climate change policies, which you said are destroying the West. What did you think?
So I thought that the big takeaway was really his sort of comparing good intentions with actual outcomes. So he talked about how the UN is supposed to be an organization to promote peace, but it really has not been the UN that has done that. It's been the actions of sovereign nations, and really President Trump sort of pressuring countries that have conflicts to get to a peaceful solution. And he, to your point, he kind of hit on this theme that you might have good intentions about migration, immigration, but the effects are actually terrible and disastrous. And the humanitarian view from President Trump's perspective is to close your borders, get control of your own borders, because there's, terrible atrocities that are committed to people who are being trafficked, et cetera, across the borders. So I thought it was a really, and then of course, and then the climate change. He made a big deal about how for the name of climate change, these countries have actually destroyed their economies, have cost a lot of jobs, and you still have, serious polluters like China who are not, are not constrained by the good desires of these Western countries on the environment. So that was kind of the theme that I saw kind of throughout his entire remarks today.
So, Dr. Heinrich, does it improve the position of the United States for the President of the United States to be that blunt with the world? Because we're used to a lot of soft and happy talk from Presidents Biden and Obama. President Trump gives haymakers. Which is better for the strategic position of the United States?
Well, I think it's better to be clear to identify our problems well. And my favorite thing that he said today was that that America belongs to the American people. We're a sovereign nation, and so we're going to act in our own interest for the benefit of the American people. So I think that's good. Now, I also understand that in this environment we're in, we've got a lot of external threats: Hugh, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and we can't contend with all of them by ourselves. We have to have allies. So I think it's fine and good for President Trump to identify these problems well, as long as there's a good follow up diplomatically to get our allies on side so that we can kind of find ways to collaborate to get our individual countries in better shape so that we can compete with our shared adversaries.
Earlier today, I was listening to Aaron McLean's School of War podcast, and he was talking with General Mick Ryan from the Australian Armed Services about kinetic conflict with China. I don't actually know that I can even comprehend what that would look like. I know you spend a lot of time thinking about it. I was in Connecticut yesterday for an event. Electric Boat is there. That's where we turn out our Virginia class, hopefully our Columbia class. Do you think we can deter that conflict, or is that something that we actually have to think through on a citizen by citizen basis to prepare for? Because we're not prepared for that right now.
No, we're not prepared for that, and the best way to head it off, of course, is to prepare for it. So I do think that Xi Jinping and sort of the rise to power and the very ideologically motivated Chinese Communist Party does want to supplant the United States as the global dominant power. And part of Xi Jinping's vision for that, of course, is taking Taiwan by force if necessary, but by coercion without force if he can get away with it. But the United States has a core interest in making sure that the world isn't sort of, divided up into spheres. We are a global superpower, and we want to have free commerce. And we believe that sovereign nations shouldn't be, of course, invaded and taken and coerced by these other powers. And so we have to deter, for the first time in history, Hugh, two major nuclear powers, China and Russia. And as you said, we're not prepared for that, but we've got agency, and we can be if we work at it.
When you think about that, how do you see the first 3 or 4 days of a conflict with China evolving?
Well, I think the first thing, the area in which the United States has our most forward deployed forces, that is American sovereign territory, of course, is the island of Guam. That is U.S. homeland Guam. American citizens are there, and that's how, in part, we project power into the region on our own sovereign territory. And so my concern is that if Guam is not sufficiently defended with missile defenses, that the Chinese, if they think that the United States is going to come to the aid of Taiwan, Guam is going to be the first thing that they hit. And of course, they think the calculation, if that were to happen, would be that the Americans would be frightened and paralyzed rather than enraged to continue to engage in the fight. I think it'd be a miscalculation. We know from World War II, obviously Pearl Harbor, that attacking Hawaii was what enraged the American people and brought us into that war. And so I think it'd be a miscalculation on the part of China, but I am concerned that the first days that Americans on Guam and our military there would be the first to be hit if we indicated we are going to protect Taiwan.
Are you concerned about our carriers being open to hypersonic swarms?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm concerned about our carriers. I'm concerned about the U.S. forces that are deployed and collaborate with the Japanese. I mean, because that's going to be a really critical ally. We need to integrate with Japan, so I'm worried there. But yes, I'm worried about our carriers, and I think that we really need a sort of a different kind of military. We've been a lot of the Air Force loves fighter jets. We have to lean more on our bomber fleet because we're going to be able to we need to have range, Hugh, to have conventional and nuclear weapons on these long range bombers. The B-21 is going to replace that awesome B-2 that we saw during Operation Midnight Hammer that took out the Iranian nuclear facilities. We're going to need like 300 of those if we need to assure our allies, deter the Chinese, potentially go to war with China, and also signal to other theaters like Europe and the Russians that they better not use this as an opportunity to act aggressively there because we have significant firepower. So I would lean more on our bomber fleet as well and get a second supply line so that we can have, a lot more bombers.
Now I have to take a break. Dr. Heinrichs, if I can pause here for a moment, then get you for 6 more minutes. I want to ask you about the president's comments to President Zelensky today that NATO should shoot down Russian planes if they enter into NATO territory. So I'll be right back with Dr. Rebecca Heinrichs of the Hudson Institute, Senior Fellow and Director of the Keystone Defense Initiative there, joined by Dr. Rebecca Heinrichs of the Hudson Institute, where she is the Senior Fellow and Director of the Keystone Defense Initiative. Dr. Heinrichs, before I go to the shoot down of Russian aircraft, I noticed that you're on the board of editors for Providence, a journal of Christianity and Foreign Affairs, with which I am not familiar. Would you tell me about that? And I want to link that to your reaction to the service for Charlie Kirk on this Sunday past.
Great. Well, love to talk about Providence. So I am a contributing editor of Providence, and it is an online journal that writes about American foreign policy from a Christian realist perspective. And what I mean by that is, we believe that that we need to be realists about American foreign policy, and understand that we live in a broken world in which countries and regimes are going to have different ideologies. They're going to contest and vie for power, and many of them are threatening to harm the United States. At the same time, we must be true to our own American principles, which are really rooted in Christian ideas about the just war. A very Augustinian way of thinking about it, and so, but we, not just Augustine, but even Calvin and Luther, Protestant theologians, argued that the United States, or that countries, should be both Christian and realist. And so Providence is just a great resource, I think, to look and to think thoughtfully about American foreign policy and different iterations of it.
Look that up.
Yeah, great.
There were many comments about America and its Judeo-Christian heritage at the service for Charlie Kirk, notably from the Secretary of State, the Vice President. What did you make of all that? That's probably the largest evangelical service. I know Bishop Sheen used to get 30 million people a night, but this was an overtly evangelical appeal, both a service of loss and mourning, but also of renewal and witness. I was kind of blown away by how explicit it was, and without question, with an audience of 20 million in immediate space, and who knows how many more in clips virtually distributed, that was vast. What do you think about that?
Well, first, I thought, I've spent, like many Americans, as part of my own mourning, I've spent a lot of time going back and looking at old Charlie Kirk, videos of him. And something that strikes me about Charlie is that he was really a classical liberal in terms of his willingness to engage with other people and other ideas, but he was also openly, explicitly, and unabashedly Christian, and his Christian arguments shaped his worldview. And so it really was demonstrating how we could, I'm a Christian, how we can engage, yes, in public discourse and making good arguments from a classical liberal perspective, and yet that are uniquely American and Christian. And that was really evidence in Charlie's memorial service. Many public officials, Marco Rubio, I thought, had the most compelling, clear gospel presentation as our Secretary of State National Security Advisor. And I think some people are sort of taken aback by that, but that's really how many of our founders spoke.
Yes, Beltway people are immediately exclaiming Christian nationalism, and they don't really understand it's a foundational understanding of the West and how the United States was intended, ordained. I just was blown away by it. Well, okay, to the question of Russian fighters, Putin is obviously testing in the Baltics and Poland. Today, the president said we ought to shoot him down. Do you think we will, and what will follow?
Well, first, I was thrilled that the president responded that way, because it's not just the content of what he said, but how quickly he knew the answer to that. He was very clear in his own mind. The Russians are violating sovereign NATO airspace, and those NATO countries, again, a theme of his UN speech, sovereign nations, they have to defend themselves. And that's how you actually have good, peaceful outcomes. And so I thought that it was really powerful and good, especially, Hugh, because there's been some reports coming out that the Pentagon is considering maybe not funding what the first Trump administration funded, which was European security initiatives on the eastern front of NATO. And President Trump clearly is saying, no, in order to get the Russians to stop, you have to be clear and decisive and shoot those violating aircraft out of the airspace. So I thought that was very good.
Now, do you think much about Putin using tactical nuclear weapons? You're a strategist. You have to think about these things. Like, you got 1 minute. I mean, is it something you think about?
Oh, yeah, I think about it a lot. I think that Putin is not bluffing. And so I think we should take it seriously. But I also don't think we should be motivated by fear and should capitulate. I think that we should counter deter Putin to understand that he's not going to gain a military advantage by threatening the United States and the West with future nuclear weapons. That we need to make sure that we maintain the nuclear peace. And to do that, we need to have a credible nuclear deterrent ourselves to make sure the Russians are not going to, they're not going to frighten us into defending our core interests and our allies.
Rebecca Heinrichs, great to have you on for the first of, I hope, many times. Wonderful to meet you virtually and in person and be able to talk to you one-on-one as opposed to our Fox friends when they're moderating. Rebecca Heinrichs is, again, the senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, where she runs the Keystone Defense Initiative. And we're all going to look up the Providence Journal online because that sounds interesting, too. Thank you, Dr. Heinrichs. James Lilacs joins me. James is an acute observer of all things Americana. He writes at jameslilacs.substack.com. He's usually funny, but we're going to talk about a serious thing. James, did you watch any of Charlie Kirk's memorial service on Sunday?
Yeah, part of it, part of the headlines and the excerpts that have been floating around the web, often chosen by people who wanted to give the worst impression of it because it was such an alien and foreign thing to them. They liked the language, they lacked any sense of feeling of what it was about, and they were terrified to see what appeared to be some sort of Christian nationalist ceremony, the precursor of the takeover. And their ventilations were interesting. There was somebody that
Well,
quite well reported.
our friends at the Wall Street Journal, and they are friends. I'm sure you know some of them, and I know some of them. They decided to deal with whatever that was, and I have my opinions on it, by writing an editorial today. Marco Rubio's Charlie Kirk message: the Secretary of State hits political notes the young need to hear, and he located Kirk's project in an aspirational politics the U.S. could sorely use. And it goes on, and it's 3 or 4 nice paragraphs about the political points he made. What do you think that misses?
That misses the efflorescence of faith that the whole thing was characterized, the central mystery and message and conviction at the heart of the entire enterprise. Now, the tweet that got me thinking this week was somebody who'd lived in the Beltway or the bubble, I can't remember what, saying that he'd watched the whole thing and found it absolutely alien and foreign. He was mystified by it. And he sort of was coming to the realization that there is a culture out there of which he knows absolutely nothing and that is very large. And the replies were what you might expect. A lot of people saying, right. And we who are in that culture have been marinating in yours our entire life and know it inside and out because there's no escape from it. You can be born in a church, you can be schooled in a church, you can grow up with mom and dad dragging you to Sunday morning in your itchy church pants, and then you leave the moment you were liberated at 18, and you can go back in 50 years and you will slide into it with a familiarity you never thought possible. Because it's part of your culture, it's part of your upbringing, the language, the songs, the tonality, the words, everything about it. And if you don't have that, then there's no tuning fork inside of you to resonate when you see and hear what's going on in that great stadium. So I mean, if there are people who are drawn to it and say, I want to know more about this because these people seem happy and they seem committed to something that seems interesting to me, well, then great. Then look into it and see if it works for you. But it was a lesson.
I was in a church in Maine this summer, an American Baptist church, and it turned out that in 1825 they had commissioned a missionary named George Boardman, a missionary to the Karen people. That's a real thing, the Karen people.
Yeah,
it's a tribe
in China,
in
right?
Burma. In Burma. And
okay,
so he took ship with his wife at age 23 to Calcutta, learned the language, went over there, died after 4 years of TB. There are thousands of Karen congregations around the world. That's 200 years later. So the Christian view is kind of long term. I don't think the newsrooms of America, and that's why I wanted to ask you this, you've been in them for a lot longer than I have. I work in studios, you work in newsrooms. I think they used to be populated with churchgoers. I don't think they are now.
They yes, and are they in it today? No, I don't think so. And again, the churchgoers of yore who used to be in newspapers, your guys there who were banging on a Winston and maybe had a bottle in the bottom drawer, may not have been the most devout, but they were culturally Christian in the way that most people were. They understood it. They understood its language and its meanings. So yeah, they had that resonance. And but now going to a newsroom, I think, and trying to spread some of these words would be like going to the people, going to the Karen people, and even more so, it would be like the Karen people because the people in the newsrooms would want to speak to the manager about why HR is letting this person in to proselytize.
You know, Jimmy Brown, not the great football player, but the great editor of the Warren Tribune Chronicle and a friend of my dad's, and he was the editor of the Trib for 40 years, something like that. He was a guy in the community. Everybody knew him. He didn't go to my dad's church or my church. I'm Catholic. My dad was Presbyterian. I think he went to the community church, but that was just part of the deal in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I just think journalism has lost that. The language, you use that word, and I've used that. They don't have the language to describe what happened. Not even the Wall Street Journal.
No, and they don't have the sense that the culture is actually nudging them to be aware of this. And what I mean by nudging is, if you go back and look at the newspapers in the 1950s and the 1960s, it's not just Christmas, Easter. The Easter pages will be filled with ads from every single gas station, gas company, five and dime, dry cleaners, the guy who puts down the gravel on the roads, all wishing everybody a happy Easter. The paper of the days before would be filled with images of church and people in their garments going to church, happy family holding hands. So much more. I mean, if nothing else, somebody in a newspaper would say, well, we're getting a lot of advertising revenue out of this, but they would realize how important this was to the community. Now, is it still as important? I mean, do we live in a post-church age? Do we live in a post-religion age? I mean, that's what Charlie was worried about, was that the lack of cultural Christianity, the falling away from the church is what imperils the American experiment because it's so essential to its founding. And
So
we
on
go
top of
on
that,
and on.
I I went down to Connecticut, up to Connecticut, to see John Fuller. He's a owner of Talk of Connecticut WDRC, an affiliate. He's an old time radio guy. He owns a lot of stations. He loves it. He got addicted to radio when he was visiting Santa Claus, and they were broadcasting, and he was interviewed about Santa Claus. And at the age of 5, he was signed. The local radio guys are gone too. It's like local newspapers and local radios. John's still doing the deal, and there's still a bunch of them out there. There are a few hundred, but there used to be thousands of them. I really think
absolutely.
It's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be a monoculture.
It is. It's a sad thing because it used to be when you drove through Minnesota and you didn't have FM radio, your AM would pick up all the little stations and you'd get the polka and you'd get the crop reports and you'd get the hogs and barrows standing steady at the slaughterhouse and then a little bit more swap meat. And then the station would fall away as you drove, chasing you for a while until it devolved into static. And then you'd pick up the next time and the next set of personalities who'd been doing the noon report for 20 years. And Mabel always
And
sat
then the
down
twins would
and
break
had
in.
Yeah, right. So and that's gone. It's all been replaced by automation. It's been replaced by monoculture stuff that's beamed from a central location so that the individuality of the AM stations in small towns is just, just kaput. God bless the guys who are still doing it, and I wish that they were still there. We have one here in town. But yeah, that's right. I mean, the newspapers, the local newspapers as a voice are going away, the AM radio and such. And we get just sort of this miasma that flows from various places that we have no choice to breathe whether we
Can you
want to
stay
or
one
not.
more
But there's always-
segment?
Yeah, sure.
All right, because I want to. I've got 1 minute for you to tell me what you think about Kimmel and the FCC. Then I have to do a couple of ads, so I'm giving you a warning. Get your 1 minute Kimmel summary ready for me when we come back.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere, America. Lilacs on Kimmel next. James Lilacs gets 1 minute on Kimmel. Go.
Well, I had to look up this Kimball fellow to see who you're talking about. Right. The American talk show in the evening is dead. It's a dead form. The days of Joan Embry showing up from the zoo to bring a marmoset to pee on Johnny Carson's shirt it's gone. It's not coming back. It was killed by a variety of things, competition, other interesting places, and dull hosts, dull, predictable, pedantic hosts who got out there and did Stephen Colbert rants that spoke to the bubble instead of Carson speaking to the nation. What Kimmel said was stupid, and I would have liked it for the market to take care of him, and apparently the market was doing just that. But the slightest whiff of any sort of nice merger you got there, shame if anything happened to it, from the FCC, I think tainted what essentially was a market decision. But now he's back, and he'll be back, and the very fact that he's coming back shows somehow that once again we've evaded the fascist boot that we thought Kimmel's firing represented. He'll last for a while and then he'll go, and he will not be spoken of in the same breath as his predecessors because, as far as we can tell, he's just simply another guy in a suit standing up there giving you the creative clapter, as they call it, where he says the appropriate politically correct thing and everybody congratulates themselves for laughing for it. I have no interest in him then. I have no interest in him now.
James, you didn't even know I was going to ask that before the break. Well done.
No,
Well
no.
done. Thank you, Lilacs. JamesLilacs.substack.com. Thank you, friend. Speaking of the aforementioned FCC, I must tell you that we are sponsored by Americans for a Balanced Budget. Their website is StopHealthCostHikes.com. They are arguing for relief for Obamacare enrollees who've been forced into the exchanges and who need tax credits. And if those tax credits expire at the end of the year, they are likely to increase their cost dramatically. Now, some people don't want to do that, and Chuck Schumer is trying to make it the central issue of the shutdown. It's not. This ought to be done in the regular order of process and ought to be done so that it impacts the people who are forced by Obamacare into the exchanges because they had lost their insurance because Obamacare was a nightmare, not to subsidize insurance companies. So it's definitely a difficult issue. Learn about it at StopHealthCostHikes.com. 77% of people want to help the people who are forced into the Obamacare exchanges, according to President Trump's pollsters. So give it a shot. Find out who's got the best argument. But it's not Chuck Schumer's argument. He's doing a jam down. I'm in the Relief Factor studio. I'm back in it after yesterday. I'll be back in it again tomorrow. Thank you, Relief Factor. And I'll get some miles in tomorrow after a couple of days of just traveling. But I'm glad to be back. I'm glad that Relief Factor makes me ready for watching the Guardians take on the Tigers tonight in what might be a late night because we are one game behind the Tigers with 6 to go. It's a pennant race. Might be the biggest comeback ever. We need to send Relief Factor to the Guardians. But you can get it for yourself by calling 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF. $19.95 gets you a 3-week starter pack. I take it every day in the first hour of my show, and I remind you in hours 2 and 3 that Relief Factor has been my sponsor for a dozen years because I love the product, and the product loves you, and thousands of you benefit from it. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or go to their website and find that starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com.